Okay, John, over here.
You probably said this, but I couldn't remember. If the soul is not the foundational individuator of persons, what then is it?
Yeah, that's a good question. I guess I would say having a certain sort of a set of rational faculties would be what would make a person. Or a mind is the same as a person. That was when we talked about this group mind monotheism. I'm inclined to think that multiple minds would mean multiple persons. So that a soul that had three separate and distinct sets of cognitive faculties, each of which is sufficient for self-consciousness, freedom of the will, intentionality, and so forth, would be three persons. And yet it would clearly be one being. So I think it gives us both the three persons, but it also gives us the unity of substance that we want to affirm in monotheism.
Okay, I guess a quick follow-up and then jumping back to the to these three-headed animal kind of
Yes.
Analogies. There are, of course, there's such things as Siamese twins, and so
Yes.
we have humans, we have people we can talk to,
Yeah.
who in some cases have just like maybe a thin band of skin
Right.
attaching them,
Right.
but in other cases it is almost to the point of like a two-headed sort of thing. Like there have been cases where it's shared all the way up to the chest cavity somewhere, and then two heads, and you can talk to the individuals.
Yeah.
So in both those cases, like if we have a thin band of skin attaching them, is that one being?
I don't think that I'm committed to that. I've thought about that as well. And the example I used of Kerberos was of an animal, as I said, that shared a complete functioning body but just had three heads and necks. So I don't think that commits us to saying that, say, two Siamese twins that are joined at the pinky finger are not two human beings that have an overlapping finger. I mean, in that sense, I think Howard Snyder would be right. So I do think just degree of overlap makes a difference as to whether we say this is a two-headed animal or we have here two distinct animals that are overlapping, on their finger. Now, with respect to, say, a Siamese twin, where you actually had a single body with two heads, I would be inclined to say that what we have, there's two persons in one body. And so we have there one human being, insofar as a human being is composed of soul and body. So you'd have one human being, but two persons. And I don't think that, I mean, all of these views, as I said, all of these views involve certain counterintuitive elements, and one might feel odd about that. But if a human being is a composite of soul and body, then I would see that as being something like two persons sharing the same body, and therefore one human being with two persons. Okay. Bill?
On the Trinity monotheistic view, if it's better for God to be more richly endowed by having multiple instances of these cognitive faculties, why stop at three? Is there a reason for essentially three, and do we retain Swinburne's arguments?
I don't know. I'm not very persuaded by Swinburne's arguments that there have to be just three. I do think that the argument that he gives for multiple personalities in the Godhead is a very good argument. I think that the idea of God being essentially loving and that love is something that gives itself to the other is a very good argument for thinking that within God there is an I-thou kind of relationship. But I'm not persuaded that having it be three is something that's explained by his argument and the lack of necessity of there being four. So I don't see any sort of argument, and I'm not aware of any reason as to why there would be three persons in the Godhead, other than this is just an essential property of God. Like his being loving and omnipotent and so forth, God just has the essential property of being triune.
Although at least some of those seem like perfections, but it seems harder to argue that threeness is a perfection.
Yeah, I haven't seen a good argument for thinking that threeness is a perfection. As you said, Swinburne does give one, but I haven't been persuaded by it. Now, maybe there are some other good arguments for thinking that threeness is somehow more desirable than two-ness or four-ness. and higher. But I haven't seen one yet. But I haven't read by any means all the vast Trinitarian literature either. So there could be some good arguments out there for 3. Anybody else? Okay.
I'm not sure how relevant this is, but I'm just wondering, based on these multiple-headed animals, and if we had Siamese twins where they share the same body all the way up to the chest, and then it's just 2 heads, seems like either, and they're both 2 persons, seems like either could say that this left hand is my left hand, but could the person that's correlated with the right head say that this left head is my left head? I mean,
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. I mean, even in cases of, with overlap, I guess I'm trying to think of how would it be if they were overlapping, and how would it be if they have the same body? I suppose maybe in either case they could say this is my left head. I mean, say they're 2 human beings that overlap. By virtue of overlapping, the idea of overlapping is that that part belongs to both. So like if Route 66 and Route 10, overlap, we say that that portion of the highway is both Route 66 and Highway 10, that they overlap. So in the case like that, I guess they could each say this is my head. But suppose that they don't overlap. Suppose that you have here 2 persons in one body, and so 1 human being. They would say the same thing, I think, that yes, this is my head, I think. So I don't think there would be any difference. I don't think that would separate the 2 views. It would just be a strange way of speaking, I guess. Yes? Eric?
I'm just hoping that maybe you can differentiate a little bit between persons, minds, and souls. I'm wondering at this point, in the case of a Siamese twin, do they? That's up to the neck.
Right.
Do they have 1 soul but 2 minds?
Yeah. See, I don't know. I don't know. That's what one would wonder. If would we say that these are 2 souls inhabiting the same body, or would we say that this would be a case of 1 soul that has multiple sets of cognitive faculties?
The 2 souls would be the overlapping.
No. I mean, you could, on either view, you could say that there are 2 souls that have the same body. Remember, I'm saying a human being is a body-soul composite. So they would have the same body, but there could be 2 souls that each have that same body. Or you could say there are really 2 bodies there, but they overlap.
Okay. Oh, how exactly does that work?
Except for the
with
head.
The Trinity idea? As far as with God, he has.
Well, in the case of God, I'm simply stipulating that we have here a single soul endowed with multiple sets of rational faculties sufficient for personhood. Okay. So that's just saying, here's the model. I'm just stipulating this. But if you're asking me to pronounce upon, say, Kerberos, I've wondered about, is Kerberos 3 canine souls sharing the same body, or is Kerberos a single soul with multiple canine faculties? I don't know. I mean, that's not part of the story, so we don't have any way of knowing the answer to that. Do you see what I mean? Right. But here I'm telling a Trinitarian story, so to speak, and I'm making it part of the story, that God is a soul which is richly endowed with cognitive faculties, so as to have 3 sets, whereas a normal soul would just have 1. Let's go to Brian here in the back.
I'm not sure how relevant this is or how applicable it is to what we're talking about, but when we talk about God in his Trinitarian sense, we tend to think of it as you said earlier on, there are 3 persons and there's one God, the essence,